Welcome everyone to our webinar, Women's Powers in Food Struggles, where we will be discussing the 2019 issue of the Right to Food and Nutrition Watch. We're very excited to have you all here. We have a lot of participants and we're sure that some more people will join in the next couple of minutes. We do hope that we're going to have an interactive debate, and also we have a fantastic panel of women activists. So it's great to have you all here today. My name is Alejandra Morena, and I am the editor-in-chief of the Right to Food and Nutrition Watch and Central America coordinator here at FIAN International, and I'm also part of the Women's Rights Working Group of FIAN International, and also of the Global Network for the Right to Food and Nutrition. So again, welcome, and I'm very happy to have so many of you. What I will do is say a couple of words about our publication, the Right to Food and Nutrition Watch, and also a couple of words on this year's issue. And then I will present the agenda and introduce the speakers one by one as they intervene. What I do see is that we have the mics on of some of my colleagues, so I will just briefly, or maybe one of my colleagues can help me to mute the mics of the speakers. I think you should have the rights to do so. Thank you very much. Okay, so what is this Right to Food and Nutrition Watch? We know that some of you are familiar with it, but perhaps some of you are hearing about this just now or very recently, so we thought we'd do a little intro about this. It is the main publication of the Global Network for the Right to Food and Nutrition, which is consisting of nearly, I think we're about now, 50 civil society organizations and social movements from across the world. So as you can see, there's a lot of people behind this publication. It's been around since 2018. And it is published currently by FIAN International and Brot für die Welt. And what we seek to do with this publication is to present the findings of a collective process of reflection. And it's a collective process of reflection with a very concrete goal for action, and to try to contribute to radically transforming food systems so that everyone's right to food and nutrition can be realized. So that's the ultimate goal of our publication. And the publication tries to connect different groups. On the one hand, those groups that are most affected by hunger, malnutrition, exploitation, and within food systems, those who are present there, and to establish a dialogue between them and also with other groups, including researchers, academics, and policymakers. And the goal of this dialogue that we're trying to establish with this publication is threefold. We're trying to monitor violations of the right to food and nutrition. We're trying to collectively improve our analysis of the challenges around the right to food and nutrition and a human rights-based governance at all scales. And we're trying to devise new forms of and responses to the challenges and forms of resistance. So ultimately, this publication is conceived as an alternative and critical knowledge co-construction tool that is departing from the experiences of people and their struggles. So that's about the publication itself. On the 2019 issue, that is the title of the webinar, that is giving the title to the webinar, Women's Power to Food Struggles. It's perhaps interesting for you to know that it's been published now one week ago, on Wednesday last week. It was presented at the Committee on World Food Security in Rome, where we had the international launch event, and now it's going to be presented and disseminated across the world by our partners. It is available in English and Spanish and French and Portuguese, and it is also complemented by a supplement that you can see here, that you can access also online, that has the key messages in a shorter text, and it has an infographic and some images. So we hope that this is a useful tool to reach different groups in addition to the articles of the publication itself. We see that we believe that this issue, the 2019 issue, is extremely timely and relevant. It is coming out at a moment of where we see that hunger is increasing. It's, I think, for the fourth consecutive year, the figures on hunger are increasing. It is coming at a time where we have clearly an environmental crisis, where human rights are under attack and they're being dismantled, and also in particular women's rights. So we believe that this can contribute to the debate on these issues, and that it is important, again, to focus on women. The previous issues of the Watch throughout the years, they have also tried to highlight the key role of women in food systems and in food work, and how women's rights and the right to food are interlinked. But in this year, we wanted to really take a closer look at this. And this issue is also the result of a collective process. Like the publication itself this year, this issue has a lot of people behind. Only when we talk about authors, peer reviewers, and people who have been interviewed for the publication, we have around over 30 people, mostly women, from around 20 regions, countries, countries around the world. So, and there's many more who have contributed in other ways. So it's really a lot of people behind it, because as we said, it's really trying to be this tool of knowledge co-construction and this collective process. So we believe the methodologies, and the results are showing this. In terms of the actual publication of the content of this year, I'm sharing here on the screen the table of contents. I hope you can all see it well, and I hope this is also encouraging you or waking up your interest to take a look at specific articles. As you can see, we have 6 pieces. The first one, of which I'm also a co-author, is more of a framing piece, and then we have 5 specific articles with concrete focus areas. One of them around the issue of how women are resisting and organizing against authoritarianism in the cases of Brazil, the Philippines, and Rojava in northern Syria. We have a piece looking at issues of hunger, poverty, race, and gender in the United Kingdom, and we have the author with us today, Deidre Woods, whom I will introduce in a minute, and she will share this piece or the key messages with us. We have a piece that we consider to be crucial, looking at the issue of gender diversity in the food system. And also, again, we have the author with us today, Paula Joya. The 5th piece is looking at the interlinkages between feminism and agroecology, and looking at how agroecology can not only help produce food that is nutritious, that is produced in a way that is respectful of the environment, but also trying to transform gender relations. And we have Neti Vive, who is also a contributor of the paper on which this article was based. So we'll be hearing about this today. And finally, we have a piece looking at the issue of migration, with the example where that was drafted with inputs from women from Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico, and the challenges they face in their path to the US, to the north, and how they're organizing and resisting. This is just to give you the overview. You're welcome to take a look at the publication online. And it just to raise a couple of points that we believed are key in the publication. The authors of the framing piece, Donna Andrews, Kia Smith, and myself, we try to analyze all these pieces and connect the dots and try to complement the analysis. That's what we do in the first one. And what we see is that, well, we try to analyze it from the nexus of women, violence, and nature, because these are elements, and food, which are elements that come in all the pieces of the publication. And we see a couple of points that came across very clearly. One point, and I'm sure that Paula and Dee will say more about this, is the importance of taking an intersectional approach, because clearly the women's identities, their experiences, and their access to food or lack thereof is not only shaped by their gender, but also by other factors such as sexual orientation, class, ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, I mentioned, yeah, right, or identity, geographical location, disability, all these shapes women's experiences, and also in particular their access to food. So we're calling upon an intersectional analysis. We do see that even though women have different experiences according to all these different factors, there's some common issues. One of them is that we see that some women are food producers, and actually they make the bulk of food producers worldwide. But despite of that, we see the paradox that they're disproportionately affected by hunger, and they're also largely invisible in food systems. And also Dee will talk about this invisibility of women in different areas. Yeah, despite their crucial role, they're really made invisible, or their work is not recognized. So this is one of the things that we see that is somehow a commonality. We also see that some are women are food producers, but many or all, we could even say, have a role in food work in different ways. Their women are making food very often. They're finding food. They're feeding their communities, their families. This is largely because of gender socially constructed roles, but this is really like the fact that women have all these roles to play. But that it is important there, because we talked about invisibility, that we really need to make all this unrecognized social reproductive work of women more visible, and to try to expose the the unfair social division of labor. Because all the food systems, the current food system, is largely maintaining on the shoulders of women and their unpaid or unrecognized labor. So we do see that the food system, the dominant one, is relying on extractivism, on a model that is exploitative of women and the environment. We see that women are dispossessed of their commons of land, rivers, oceans. Women and their communities are dispossessed, and also at the same time we're seeing the destruction of nature. So in this context, what we have seen across all the articles of the watch, and that becomes clear in the framing piece and also the supplement that I mentioned before, is the issue of violence and how women are affected in different degrees, but they're all in different types. But women are affected by violence due to patriarchy and capitalism, which are closely interlinked. So the inequality and the violence that women face are limiting the right to food and nutrition and their human rights in general. And what we're trying to do is look at these power relations, look at what is behind, and trying to expose the structural violence that is degrading, as I said, of both women and the environment, and women in their communities. But we painted a pretty grim picture, but what we really also tried to do in this publication and also the previous issues is to highlight how people are organizing, how people are resisting, how women are expressing their autonomy and their agency as political actors and subjects. So we did see this across the board in the watch, and I'm sure that our colleagues today will also talk more about this. They themselves are active in different ways. We see examples in the watch of how women are marching on the streets, examples in Brazil of the March of the Daisies trying to fight agribusiness. We see how women are organizing, or like they're influencing policymaking spaces, like the Committee on World Food Security. And Neti is a member of one of these working groups of women trying to influence and occupy the space in decision-making spaces, for example, in Rome in relation to food policies. We see how women are also resisting by actually applying agroecology and these other ways of imagining food and producing food in a way that is different, that is not destructive to the environment, and that is also transforming gender relations, as I said. So we see this something that also Neti will talk more about. And finally, what the publication is trying to call out on food and feminist movements that are really diverse, to really build alliances and join this discussion to advance the rights of women, and to create food just systems in an inclusive way. And I'm sure Paula will talk about this more. And that we really want to say that we cannot understate the power of women's resistance, of their rage, both individual and collective, to improve social and ecological relations in the face of all these multiple crises that we're facing. As I said at the beginning, increasing hunger, ecological destruction, and so on. So this is some of the key messages of the watch that I wanted to share with you. And I will now very happily introduce our the agenda that I also hope you're seeing here in the screen. And I will introduce each of the panelists as we go. We have first, we will have Deidre Woods to speak about the article Invisible Women, Hunger, Poverty, Racism and Gender in the UK. Then we'll have some time for questions. Then we'll have Paula Joya talking about her article Coming Out, Gender Diversity in Food Systems. And finally, we'll have Nettie Vive from Canada talking about the piece Without Feminism, There's No Agroecology. Okay, so a short introduction on Dee, and then the floor will be yours. Deidre Woods is the co-chair of the Independent Food Aid Network, which is based in the United Kingdom. She's the author of this article of the watch that I just mentioned, and she describes herself as a disabled, decolonial, Black feminist, social justice actionist, and community food practitioner. Thank you very much. I will turn on your camera, Dee, and then the floor is yours. Great. I'll turn off mine. Yes, fantastic. Hello, Dee.
Hello, greetings everyone. Thank you for inviting me to write this piece in the first place, because I think it's really important that Black women get some visibility around these issues, and the issues of exclusion and marginalization, you know, within society, within policy spaces, you know, within all aspects of life, has been something that is not being illuminated, despite Black academics, despite various activists, you know, bringing it to the forefront, it is not being illuminated enough. So thank you for allowing me to do this. Let me tell you a bit more about the Independent Food Aid Network. We're a collection or collective of frontline food organizations who provide aid. We're not all necessarily food banks. And we started in 2014 as a way to examine the structural causes of what we call food poverty here, or hunger in the UK, and to campaign in political spaces for change. So apologies, my alarm. So my organization, Granville Community Kitchen, is one of the founding members of that. And Granville Community Kitchen started because I myself was experiencing hunger due to issues of lack of access to social benefits as a disabled woman and having to take legal action to have them. And it started with other women coming together, women of color, as well as other women who were in similar situations. So the article focuses on some of these underlying causes, including, you know, the hostile political environment that we're in right now. And a lot of people are well aware of the Windrush situation, and even more recently, the sort of right to remain issues around people from the EU. But what they don't understand is that for people of color, this is something that's been changing since the late 60s, early 70s, with various policies and legislation coming into place that, undermine our freedoms and undermine our rights to be here as, Black British people, as women, and as parents. So I might be a British citizen, but it doesn't necessarily mean my children are citizens and therefore not eligible to receive any sort of benefits or to work. The other thing the article looks at is that lack of analysis. And whilst I was writing this, thank goodness, sort of the GLA Global, the London Authority, was actually looking at London statistics and exploring sort of gender and exploring, race, and sort of literally highlighted that Black people, people of color, Asian people, are not doing as well as they thought. We are figuring in the sort of highest percentiles of poverty, of homelessness, of joblessness, of, education, not sort of attaining sort of high levels of education, literacy, and hunger. And most striking figure for me was that 40.5% of people being most affected by hunger in London are Black and Asian women. And that is an alarm bell for me. And that means we need to be doing more work. We need, to have academics to be doing that research, but not just doing that research to back up those figures and to drive sort of policy change, but we need policy. We need research from a different viewpoint, a different analytical lens, and intersectionality lens that centers Black women, women of color, and gender. And I think, the other thing, as an activist for me is the inspiration I draw from, the younger generation of women who are organizing and who are, vocalizing as well, who are stepping up into political spaces, who are, getting into sort of academia as well as organizing on the ground to sort of bring greater illumination to all these things. So, I'm a person who likes conversation, so I won't talk much more. And I'd like to, hear some questions or thoughts and opinions, about the piece. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dee, and I think it's a really great approach to leave space for comments and questions. Let me see here in the let's give also participants a second to see if they come up with something now that you have finished, and if not, they also can keep thinking for the debate session towards the end, or even the other panelists or my colleagues if you have some suggestions or comments on something you would like Dee to deepen, that's very much welcome. Let me see. Okay, I don't see particular questions right now. Let me see. Yes. Okay, we have two more comments than questions, perhaps. Let me read them to you. We have one from Miriam Baike. She said that she was really touched when you said that mainly Black women face hunger, lack of education in the UK. And then we also have Mamata Dash, who's saying, thank you so much for that powerful sharing. And I really like the suggestion about a different kind of research that looks into the important intersectionalities. So there's our interaction happening here in the chat. And actually, something that is maybe I'd like to read a quote, Dee, from your
Sure.
article, and maybe you can say something more about this.
Okay.
You said that we chose a quote that we thought it was powerful, that it says the rekindling of Black feminism and Black women organizing in the UK offers new hope in all areas of life, from food security, community and health, to academia, politics and policy. I don't know if you would like to take some more concrete examples from your activism on how you see this Black feminism being rekindled and being active.
Okay. So I came up in the 80s in the era of womanism, and when Black feminism was like, really alive and burning in the UK. And then sort of in the 90s and early 2000s, it just seemed to dissipate. And I think that goes alongside, all the things that were happening that were, eroding at Black women, women as carers, women being disabled, women with mental health issues, things were being eroded. And I think it was hard for a lot of women to be active. And what we have now are people like myself being rekindled because we have to, to make this world a better place for our children. We have to step up. Likewise, we're seeing republications of sort of really good books, from the 80s and early 90s, even 70s, I would say, that sort of fanning those flames, as well as I've said before, sort of young women, sort of women in their 20s, early 30s, right, who are really passionate about social justice. One of the things I didn't say is that race is not something that's easily talked about in any space in the UK or in Europe. And I think that's why, for a lot of us, we have to do this now.
Thank you, Dee. I see now the participants are also getting more ideas. I would suggest we take one more questions. I see two, and we can keep the other one for the debate so that we also make sure that we will have sufficient space for all the speakers. Let me see. We have Martha Caswell saying, you mentioned the need for academics to take on this issue, not just affirming statistics, but instead thinking about the why behind the statistics and how to transform this. Do you have recommendations for academics or good experiences with research that has been positive? And I'll keep the other question, Tommaso, for the final debate. Thank you.
Okay. As a non-academic who sort of is in academic spaces, I think it is about co-creating research questions, one, but two, also looking at different knowledge systems and decolonizing sort of your current approach of researching things, so that you come up with something that is truly representative of what is happening, and that would be useful to policymakers, which I am myself a food policy maker at the sort of city regional level on the London Food Board. And that is exactly what we're doing. We're working with academics, we're working with local people on ground to generate really good research. But it can't just be a handful of us. We need that, wider academia to be doing good research, sound research.
Great. Thank you, Dee. That also very much links with some discussions we're having often on our publication itself and how it is developed, how we engage with scholar activists. That's what we call academics who are really close to what's happening. And I think that that's a really interesting debate. I would suggest we will take the other question addressed to you at the debate session, and then we can move on to our next panelist. We're happy to have Paula Joya. Let me just 1 second. I will make sure here that that Paula can turn on her mic and her screen. Fantastic, great. And can you turn on your mic, Paula? Yes. Okay. Great. Okay, we should be able to hear you, Paula. Hello?
Yeah, hello. Yes.
Great. Okay, fantastic. So just to introduce you briefly, we have Paula Joya. She's also an author of this year's watch, as I mentioned before. She's a farmer and a beekeeper in a community farm in Germany, and it's part of an organization that is part of La Via Campesina, this peasant social movement, and she's also currently in the coordination committee of the European coordination Via Campesina, and she's very vocal in trying to put forward issues related to gender diversity. So we're very happy to have you, Paula. You have about 10 minutes, and I'm happy to show the slides that you have shared as you speak. Thank you.
Okay, I tell you when it's the moment to put the slides. Okay, so you can put the first one.
Great.
Yeah. So so I cannot see this. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So first of all, thanks very much for the opportunity of bringing a gender diverse perspective into the watch. I have to admit that at the first moment I was unsure, about the topic into a publication which is dedicated to women issues, when I would be speaking about gender diversity, what is not equal, to women. So I questioned myself: is it like the right place to put this article? Would it be legitimate to use a space dedicated to women for other issues, right? And after a reflection I had with myself, and also maybe discussing with some other comrades, I realized that yes, it would be good to place this article there, because since non-heteronormative people are still very much marginalized in the society, including within the food system and within this food sovereignty movement, it would be important to occupy this space, a space of, from what I understood, a space of solidarity also with other actors, and also to use this space to launch a dialogue, with the ones working on women issues. So therefore, I accepted the invitation and wrote this piece. As Alejandra already mentioned, I'm myself coming from agriculture. I'm a beekeeper, living in a community which is also trying to redefine social relations. So yeah, I come from the ground, let's say from the agricultural ground. So the the right-wing and conservative forces that are gaining more and more power at the moment worldwide, are often the ones also denying human rights. And in that context, women, but also homosexuals, transsexuals, and non-heteronormative, other non-heteronormative people, they are really on the front line of these targets, right? So the world in which we live, it's a world based on a binary understanding of gender, and this understanding leads LGBTI communities, what stands for lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transsexuals, travestis, intersexuals, queer people, leads those communities to face structural discriminations, and this means also suffering social, cultural, and economical exclusion. So in that sense, often their rights to food, but also the rights to housing, and even the right to life are not guaranteed. So it's important. So it's important to understand this, and on the other hand, it's also important that we highlight the contradictions that exist also, even within rights-based movements, right? So on one hand, we have progressive movements struggling for dignity and justice. But on the other hand, also these movements sometimes reproduce behaviors which come from a mainstream society, which is based on patriarchy and on capitalist values. For example, heteronormativity. So the food sovereignty is one of these movements, from my point of view, a movement that on one hand tries to defend a feminist agenda amongst small-scale food producers, but also consumers. But also there, in the food sovereignty movement, we notice that sexist patterns are still in place. So I think it's important to realize that the naturalization of gender roles in agriculture, for example, and the non-mention of LGBTIQ actors, for example, in key declarations such as the Millennium Declaration, which is a very important declaration for the food sovereignty movement, reflects exactly this invisibility and the discrimination these actors face. So during within the article, I tried to bring some concrete examples to show these multiple discriminations and how their right to food and to nutrition are affected, among also as well as also other rights, human rights. So the article aims also to foster a dialogue between the feminist and the queer feminist movements, together also with the food sovereignty movement, thereby strengthening the potential for collaboration. So we can join forces and embrace a convergence in a collective struggle for human dignity and for human rights. So this was like from my reflections. I thought this could be an opportunity for that. I bring several examples. I bring examples from urban areas where, for example, in the US, urban Afro-descendant transsexual communities suffer quite a lot violence and discrimination by the society and also by the police, what affects, for example, their that they can retain their job. So many times they cannot maintain their job, so they cannot access economical how to say they cannot make a living. So this leads them to have to count on emergence facilities, which are also based on gender, on a binary gender understanding and so on. And since they are not a woman nor a man, no, they cannot access the service and so on. Then I bring also an example from indigenous communities. I would not be able to go into this right now because of time, but maybe later on during the discussion. But I would really like to go into the agricultural aspects, no, which I also bring. I bring several examples of agriculture, and I think it's very important to mention resistance examples, no. First of all, I think it's interesting to say that in agriculture, since we are deeply connected with nature, no, because our work is indirectly a relation with nature, often also nature is used to legitimize a binary understanding of sex, of gender, right? As if nature would be really heteronormative. If you start to have a deep look into nature, you are going to see that gender is not at all heteronormative. No, this is just a capitalist patriarchal legitimization, let's say. No, plants, for example, they reproduce themselves not only through male and female pollination. No, there are many plants that show us how reproduction can take place through the roots. So here, gender doesn't really plays a role. Or, for example, there are many animals that are intersectional and intersexual, pardon. And yeah, this is just not visibilized. I would like also to bring the example of bees. No, bees are tremendous animals which shows that a collective structure, a collective organization is extremely important. And here, male, female, it doesn't really plays a role. What is important is the collective work of the whole hive, no, in order to keep the whole life as individual alive and to reproduce it. In that sense, one of the examples I bring is the example of the Landdyke feminist family farm from Taiwan, which is a LGBTI community in agriculture, where they try to build a new understanding of family, no, which is not based on private inheritance, on blue ties, or on gender stereotypes. And while they are also contributing for the maintenance of biodiversity, of producing food and feeding their local community and so on. I also bring some examples from two different regions of La Via Campesina. On one hand, here in Europe, where we have been developing a process throughout the last years to strengthen our LGBTIQ peasants members, showing that, highlighting that gender and sexuality are not less important than our struggle for fair prices and so on. And finally, the last example I bring, sorry, I forgot to tell you to go throughout the slides. You can already go actually to the last one. And finally, the last example is the example from the Landless movement in Brazil, the MST, where they also have been very active on that agenda since many years. And right now, in the current right-wing context of Brazil, this is a extremely important struggle as well, not only in terms of strengthening LGBTI landless communities, but also the overall struggle of agrarian reform in Brazil, because we need to count with more and more actors. And just to conclude, I think it's extremely important that we unify our struggles, struggles for social justice, for human rights, for food sovereignty, for LGBTIQ, and also for feminist agendas, In the context we are right now, we cannot allow us to be dividing ourselves. In the contrary, we have to get together, because in the end, it's a common struggle for the rights of food and for human dignity. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula, for bringing all these important points and also these final calls for building alliances and solidarity. Let us check briefly here if there's concrete questions. I haven't seen any at this point, but I'm sure something will come up. And if not, we will take you up on the on your interest in mentioning also this case of indigenous peoples. We can do that later if time allows. Let me see. No, I don't see any of the any questions right now, and also the ones that I had you covered. I thought that the examples that you put forward are extremely illustrative, and this is also something that we really want to try to do in the watch, is see this how people are doing things differently, reimagining food systems and so on in a very concrete, tangible way. So you cover all that. Okay, then I would suggest we move to the last panelist, Nettie, and we'll keep the discussion a bit later. Let me see. Let me turn your mic on, Nettie, and your camera. Hello, Nettie. Let's see.
Hello, can you see me?
I cannot see you yet. I can hear you. Let me see. Let's give it a second. It's turning on. Yes, now we can see you. Fantastic. Great. Okay, then I will introduce you briefly, Nettie, and then you have also about 10 minutes for your intervention on the issue of agroecology. Nettie Wiebe is also someone who has contributed more indirectly to this year's Right to Food and Nutrition Watch. I mentioned we have this article number 5 called "Without Feminism, There's No Agroecology." And it's interesting to highlight that this article of the Watch is based on a longer paper developed very much collectively through a very participatory process by the working group, women's working group of the Civil Society Mechanism for relations with the Committee on World Food Security. So Nettie has been involved in the process of developing that. She's also like Paula, not just talking theory, but she's also practicing organic farming. She's an activist and professor emerita at St. Andrews College from the University Saskatchewan. Sorry for not pronouncing that properly, possibly. And she's also a member of La Via Campesina in Canada. And yeah, I already mentioned this part of the working group on women of the CSM. So Nettie, we're excited to have you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a thrill to be part of this. I can't see my own camera here, Alejandra, but that's okay as long as you can see me. As you said, I'm in a particular location in the food system. I'm both a farmer and an activist on food issues. And of course, like most women in the world, I spend a lot of time thinking about food, preparing food, and feeding others. So that I share in common with probably almost everyone, every person who's on this call. I'll just give a little bit of background to the discussion on agroecology and feminism. And the backdrop has already been explained to some extent, that there's an enormous amount and growing amount of poverty and exploitation and food insecurity, and it's particularly grim for women, and ironically, particularly tragic for rural women. And in the big scope of things, that shouldn't be possible, that the women who are key to feeding the world are themselves malnourished and often food insecure. So that's a huge and in some ways almost indescribable injustice in the way the current system is organized. The latest data that we just had at the Committee on Food Security, World Committee in Rome, again demonstrated just how insecure, food insecure, how the rights to food of women and rural women are systematically violated. So this growing inequality is something that's at the heart of our discussion here, that we have to address in order to move forward. Coupled with that, of course, and you've mentioned that also in the introduction, is the ecological collapse and the climate chaos that's enveloping all of us in all parts of the world in various ways. And part of that, a big part of that, is the biological loss of biodiversity in the food system. And that's not accidental. The dominant trends in the food system have been the industrialization of the food system and the corporate takeover of so much of food producing resources, and particularly of trade in food. That whole neoliberal agenda of financializing, commodifying, and usurping power over the food system. And that was the whole trade agenda. And out of that, problem, the resistance among small-scale farmers, peasant organizations, and indigenous and rural food workers, the resistance was, and the part of it that I was part of, was to build a global movement, the Via Campesina, to fight against this takeover of the food system, because we understood from the beginning that if the corporations and the financial investors owned and directed the food system, it would lead to further standardization, industrialization, and displacement and hunger in rural areas. And that is, in fact, what we're seeing. So our putting food sovereignty on the agenda, and that was the Via Campesina initiative, putting food sovereignty on the agenda was a political act to try and take back, in a broad-based movement, take back control over food-producing resources. So it was a move, it continues to be a move to shift the power relations within the food system. But those power relations, of course, include women and men, and a whole diverse group of peoples who are part of the food producing systems, fisher people, indigenous peoples. So it's a broadly based movement to try and achieve that power shift, to take back control over the food system. But taking back control meant not only just taking back control of what there was, but also of ensuring that what we build going forward is in fact a completely different kind of a food system. Because in the face of what we've got here, which is ecological threats to the foundations of our food system, we have to build something that's sustainable and that recognizes that we have to have not more standardization, but in fact more diversity. And that's the whole agenda of agroecology. Agroecology is around, is based, it's a science, it's a practice, but it's also a social movement to change the relationship we have to food producing resources. One of the things about industrial, and I really experienced that where I farm, that one of the things about industrial food systems is that they're based on standardization. fewer and fewer massively produced monocultures. And in order to get standardization in nature, as with people, you have to employ a lot of manipulation and brutal suppression of diversity. And agroecology speaks counter to that. Our movement is to build a food system that, instead of suppressing diversity, actually enhances it and encourages it and works with nature. And equally, it's a social movement. Instead of suppressing diversity, you must enhance it, embrace it, because that's the future for us. I really appreciated, I must say, what Paula said about the need for diversity and to escape and eschew these kinds of standardized, binary, patriarchal social constructs which suppress and oppress diversity. That kind of dominance has no place in a future where we're all going to live and survive. And we all means everybody. So the whole agroecology movement is a movement also to change the practices, of course, but also to change our view of who we are socially, but also ecologically. What kind of a relationship we have with food systems, with other living organisms. And that's where feminism comes in, I think. That striving for visibility, for equality, for dignity, for everybody. And that unraveling of the dominant patriarchal systems. That's where we as feminists who practice agroecology in the context of food sovereignty, how those are linked together. It's about the relationships to nature, to each other, to our food, and transforming those social as well as those ecological relationships. And I'm completely convinced that we are not going to transform the social relationships successfully unless we also start to understand and transform our relationship to our surrounding, to other life systems, that we understand where we are in the whole web of life. So, and that deep yearning for more diversity, for more equality, for just relationships, that's what agroecology and feminism are about. So I see those as inextricably linked together. I want to just say one further thing before I stop here, and that is, this is an initiative for all of us, but particularly, and I've been really, really encouraged by this, it's particularly an initiative, a movement of young women. In the transformation of food systems, it's often been young women and men, but women have often taken the lead in building these new communities and practicing this new agroecological social movement transformation. I'll conclude here by saying that you said earlier in the webinar that this issue is one where women can express, where feminism and the rage against the equality and the oppression is expressed. But that's of course true, but we need to express both the rage, the determination, and the love. You have to love that which is around you in order to help to change it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nettie, for this so clear and inspiring intervention, and also perfectly on time. Let me also check again how the chat is going. I also invite my colleagues who are connected from FIAN International, Andrea Nuila, our Women's Rights Coordinator, and my colleague Emily Mathiasen, monitoring coordinator, among others. If they see anything here other to help me out, please, and also to complement if they like. And also, I invite for a discussion among the panelists to the extent that you wish to do so. I think they complemented each other very nicely, and there was a very nice flow in some things that you were picking up, all of you, the three of you. So that's also, of course, an option. Let me see. I do not see right now a comment or question particularly to you, Nettie, but I invite the others, or also to, if you would like to, what actually I would have a question for you, Nettie, because I think like Paula did, like mentioning some concrete examples of women around the world to how they're organizing and practicing what we're talking about. If you can come up, if you know anything that was particularly inspiring from your experience, if you would like to share something, that I would like to hear that. And if not, also just to highlight for participants that in the Watch article, we have examples from Cuba, from India, from Mali, which I think are actually just proving what you were saying, Nettie, right? How ecology can help transform these relations, not just with nature, but among the community members and the social relations. So I would also invite everyone to take a look. So would you like, could you think of something that you would like to share in terms of concrete experiences, Nettie?
Well, let me just share something about a structural experience. When the Via Campesina movement was formed, it was in fact it replicated as many organizations do, the kind of patriarchal structures, in that the leadership, the selected leadership was well, at the first go, entirely male. And what we in the Via Campesina peasant women insisted on was that was actually not reflective of what we were about, and how a strong movement to change food systems would need to be structured. So several years into the movement, we made some structural changes with some considerable struggle, but we made structural changes which restructured the Via Campesina internationally to ensure gender parity in the leadership structure. And women took that space and are occupying that space and are enlarging that space as the movement grows, which is an important structural shift. And demonstrates that although, as everywhere else, and maybe even more obviously in rural areas, patriarchy and the dominance of males in the food system, agriculture, as I often say, is deeply patriarchal. The way it's structured within the movement, in the social movements, we're challenging that and have challenged that and continue to challenge that.
Thank you, Nettie. Yeah, and this is very much also links to what Paula was saying, like how the need to look inside also of organizations and the structures and in the movements, not only to relate to the outside world, but looking inside of yeah, our own structures. I'm seeing some comments here. Some more questions, more comments than questions, but still I would like to share. Karen Ehrens is thanking all the three speakers and saying that she has gained a lot in terms of so many ways to redirect her thinking and action from each of you. So she's thanking you for that, and also in particular, she's thanking you, Karen, for the reminder to find and show love, which I think is also very pertinent. And I see that we have someone from Iraq connecting, Sadia, sorry, and she would like to hear about challenges in application of the agroecology, which is also interesting. Let's also collect a couple then, perhaps, and then we can give the floor to the speakers. So this was about agroecology, Nettie, particularly to you, I would say, but also the others. I know Paula also knows a lot about this in case she wants to complement in terms of the challenges and facing in applying agroecology. Then we have a question from Mamata Dash. How does one continue to engage in this conversation further? We're in the process of developing a strand of work around women, smallholder farmers and producers, focusing on living income and dignity of women in agroecology. I guess it's a question, in a way, to all of us and to all the speakers, how we can continue this conversation. And I will read the one that was directed to Dee. Sorry, just to say, I think we can now open the floor for all kinds of questions, because I now see that we have a mix. So we're now in the more general debate. I wasn't clear about that. We had one at the beginning for just a second. Here, from Tommaso Ferrando for Deidre. Can you say more in the way which the food movement in the UK takes or does not take into account intersectionality? And maybe about the need for historical restoration in order to move forward in the food system. That's for D specifically. And two more, and then we open for the reply, so we don't have so many. From Flavia Mara, how we can approach the debate on feminism and ecology also in the global north countries. Flavia Mara, in terms of, and let's take this. I see one from my colleague, Andrea Nuila. How does she think that this challenges mainstream feminism? In the West especially. And yeah, let's take this round for a first round, and then I will continue with one more that is a very appropriate question that can also help us towards the conclusion. Yes, okay. So we had the questions on agroecology, and we had one question for D. I will turn on your camera, D, again, if that's okay with you. Yeah. And also Paula. Let's now turn all the mics and so that you can all intervene. Also Paula's.
Alejandra, it's Nettie, I'm not seeing my camera, I'm not seeing my image, so I'm not seeing anybody else's image either.
Okay, but we can see you, and that's
okay. Okay.
I think you will need to click somewhere. Yes. Okay. So the floor is yours. Maybe we can start with Nettie, then the concrete question to D, and then Paula can complement.
Okay, let me just begin with that question of what are the challenges for agroecology. Well, clearly the first and foremost challenge is that the food producing resources, land particularly, but also waterways and seeds are being taken over by the corporate sector, by agribusiness. And the concentration of land, the land grabbing, and that's not only in southern countries, that's also in the north here. The financialization and the concentration of land ownership means that smallholder producers, peasants, and small-scale fisheries have a tremendous challenge to try and take ownership of or take control over food producing resources again, take those back. And if you don't have land, you can't, or if you don't have secure tenure on land, you can't actually practice agroecology in food systems. So that's a huge problem, the financialization and grabbing of food producing resources. And the other commensurate problem along with that, I think I mentioned that, is that those resources are being systematically degraded, so that even where we have access to land and water, once it's been poisoned and polluted and that's of course part of the whole climate chaos thing. It's harder and harder for us to produce food, to produce healthy food, to continue to keep our agroecological systems healthy and flourishing. And this is extremely important. Women have an extremely important role here because they are traditionally the keepers of traditional seed and knowledge, and that's what we need to actually enhance and do regenerative food production. So we cannot allow that to be undermined and destroyed. Women are just key to that.
Thank you, Nettie. Dee?
Yes, hi Tommaso. One, there's a lack of intersectionality in the UK food movement because I think there's this blinkeredness, cultural blinkeredness around race and class. So we have a food movement that's dominated by white middle class males. It's increasingly becoming more female, but there is a complete lack of diversity except for the same 5 people that, you know, who are active in the food movement. And the only way we are going to change that is to continue to raise our voices and say, we're here and we're part of this system, and to recognize our historical role as the British Empire in our global food system, and how that sort of set up, you know, these power relationships that Nettie talks about in terms of race, in terms of class, in terms of gender, and how a lot of those things are still perpetuated today. And for me, agroecology is part of that reclamation of power, of our knowledge. You know, it isn't just about reparations or access to land. It is about repair, and it's repair socially, culturally, spiritually, you know, on a lot of different levels. Yeah.
Thank you, Dee. Paula, would you like to answer any of the questions? And also, if you would like to say something about the case you didn't mention before around Indigenous peoples, you're also welcome to do so now, because we do have time.
Okay, I would like first to mention something related to what Nettie said before about the development within La Via Campesina. No, Nettie described how La Via Campesina, did a, how to say, organizational change in order to have gender parity. You know, and I think it was extremely important step, you know, made by the movement at that time. But I also think that it is about time to go further beyond that. You know, La Via Campesina is a radical movement when it comes to the anti-capitalist struggles. No, so why can we not also be radical in terms of gender, right? So this is part of these contradictions we have inside, and which myself and also some others have been trying to highlight within the last, I would say, 5-6 years. It's and I think it's important when we talk about queer feminism or bringing non-heteronormative discourse inside the struggle. It's definitely not about putting heteronormative heterosexual people against non-heterosexuals. No, it's not about putting anyone against each other. In the opposite, it's about embracing, it's about unifying, no, and giving visibility to all actors. It's about uniting forces. So I think it's important to clarify that. I also would like to mention one thing, that sometimes we are very well intentioned and we really want to be in solidarity and to how to say, to embrace new actors and so on. But I would like also to bring the example of this the same watch that we are talking about. No, when I read the first article, the introduction article, I realized that sometimes I felt myself not really well understood. No, because the article, the first article, sometimes, let me see, for example, says that there's one, I would like to quote one sentence. The 5 articles give explicit visibility to Black, Dalit, Indigenous, migrant, refugee, and LGBTIQ women. And when I saw LGBTIQ women, I thought, what is that? Mm. No, because it's not about women. It's about lesbian, gays, bisexuals, transsexuals, transvestites, intersexuals, and queer people. It's not about women, no? So I felt like, wow, I have not been understood. And there are several other quotes of my article throughout the first article, no, this introduction article, where I felt, it's not really what I was trying to say, or it's not the only dimension I was trying to say. And I just want to mention here, it's not, I know that the people behind that, the editor board and so on, they were really well intentioned, but I just want to show how all of us are really, how to say, part of, or how to say, we suffer from all these behaviors and these mindsets that comes from the society. And it's also about reflecting also myself. No, I also reproduce things, and it's about rethinking all this. Also, when it comes to translation, when I read the Portuguese translation, in the short part where there's a description of actors, of authors, I saw that I've been described as a female. No, it's about language. The article was written in English, so in English you don't have this female and male. And yeah, when I read I think the Portuguese and the Spanish, French I don't speak, so I don't know. I saw, okay, I've been described as a female, and it was something important for myself when I wrote the bios, that I didn't want to let myself be put into a category, no? So there are quite a lot of issues here, and even when we are well-intentioned and want to rebuild those kind of relations, there are traps, and we have to be aware about that and try to rebuild them. I don't know if it's because now I spoke a bit longer. I don't know if I should still go into the indigenous people, or maybe we continue with small questions.
Sure. Let's take a second round, and then I think you can still do that. To the last point, just to say, because that we appreciate and welcome all the feedback, and that it's a learning process, as you said, and there's a learning curve, and it was, as you said, very well intentioned. But I have to be very honest that in this piece, what we were trying to do was capture some of the common threads, and it was this difficulty we had along the lines of what you said at the beginning, Paula, on how to integrate this piece into an edition that is, other than that, mostly focused on women. So we struggled and we discussed and we tried our best, and of course, if we didn't fully capture something correctly, we're open to apologize, and I will also pass this further to the co-authors. But at least rest assured that we didn't fully naively, in a way, try to do it. We struggled in general to try to be respectful of the comments while trying to do a sort of synthesis, and so it was quite a challenge. But we really take note, and I think we're in this together to discuss and to take note of what you just said, and then continue learning on farther. On that particular point. And on the translation issue, is a very permanent point as well. We were trying to check that in particular, but I think at some point just slipped. It's
Can I just say something? Can I just intervene here to say thanks to Paula for that, because we're trapped by the language structures and the way we think about things. And I just want to say that I really appreciated, Dee, that you mentioned that the early feminist movements, this wave of feminist movements in the 70s started at a certain place. And it's my fervent hope that we're not at that place anymore, that we're much more, we embrace a much larger diversity, and that we're much more consciously reflective of how we're constrained by the systems in which we've been educated and the communities in which we live and the families in which we live. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, definitely. This is the good thing about having a dialogue and interaction and constructing collectively and learning from each other and giving space in an accurate and respectful way. I do see a lot of comments now. I thought it was a really nice one because it was a bit overarching. Yeah, if we take note, and then you can all choose which ones you would like to address. You can. I think this one could go for all. It's also, again, Tommaso. He's asking if you could all speak about how you think that the right to food is a useful tool in the fight for women's rights and intersectionality, and is it enough? Yes, I think it's about the right to food approach. Then we have some further comments. Some people were just making more comments rather than questions, sharing information. I think it's, and also appreciating your interventions. There was someone, just a second. Sorry, this chat is very small. It's really hard to read in this little section. There's some long comments. Let me just try to open it. Okay, yes, I think this is better. Okay, this is Ala Yayap. She's saying, thanks a lot for discussing such a vital issue for women to reach sovereignty on food. She's writing from Gaza. Well, no, she's writing, we in Gaza Urban and Peri-Urban Agriculture Platform, GUPAP, focus in enhancing the resilience of entrepreneurs women, as more than 50% of agricultural working are on the shoulders of women. As working of women are not thanked, so as the work of women is not being recognized and estimated, so it is important for them that they can influence policies for women farmers. It's an important issue for them, she's saying, and her question is, how can the world's feminist movements help women in Gaza and all over the world who suffer from hunger and don't have access to food? And then a final one, perhaps. I know I covered it. There were more comments. Anna Katerina Voss is sharing that, well, she's also thanking for this beautiful, inspiring webinar and the Right to Food publication watch. And she wanted to bring to the attention of the speakers and I guess all the participants, because it's very pertinent, that the next year, from the in April 2020, the World Social Forum of Transformative Economies will take place in Barcelona, in Spain, and that it has a transversal themes of agroecology and food sovereignty, commoning, social and solidarity economies, and feminist economies, and gender perspectives. So a lot of very points, that aspects that she's saying is very much related to what we're discussing here, and she's making an invitation to everyone who might be interested in weaving further connections and networks. She shared a link that I can happily share with anyone who is interested. And the rest are just thanks. Just one second, I see. Okay, let's take it from there for one more round. Yes, who would like to start?
it's the first question around the right to food and what kind of a useful tool it is. I'll be very brief here, but it just seems to me it's a key tool because it changes the narrative from women as being victims to women as being rights holders and who have justified claims, who have agency, who are change makers, decision makers. And I think that's a very important shift in how we see ourselves, that we're claimers, legitimate claimers of rights, and that the right to food is key of those rights. I'll stop there.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Nettie. But my only issue is that with all of these things, we're not really tackling the intersectional and intersectionality issues. And, you know, we must find some mechanism of tackling sort of deeply embedded racism, right? Deeply embedded patriarchy, ableism, and all these other systems that are deeply entrenched, not only in our food systems, yeah, but within our cultures and within our systems of government. And, you know, if the right to food can achieve that, that would be good, right? But I think, you know, we need to be building solidarity with other movements and with other calls for, you know, equality and justice.
Yes, yeah, my response is also to that question. I think the right to food is, as has been already mentioned, key, and especially key to achieve public policies, no, that leads to equality, that leads to really, nutrition and so on. But I think it's very important not only to remain on that policy level, no, that we have, I think it's related to what Dee just said. We have to go further. We cannot just wait for politicians to make policies. No, we have to keep working on the ground, keep working on our local communities. We have to actually, you have to be multitasking, no, and doing everything at the same time. No, we have to do advocacy work, but we have also to do community work, and everything at the same time.
Multitasking is the word.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Good. I know one of my colleagues had a question, but she's struggling with electricity. So let me see. I think I'm not missing any concrete questions. So I will just invite you maybe.
I just want to return to the question of the Gaza,
right.
and just to say that that is one of the many areas in the world where it's so clear that that the oppression and the usurping of food producing resources and water are such huge injustices. That just seems to me one of the sort of target areas where that's exposed and so clearly needs rectification.
Yeah, for me, it's not how can world's feminist movements help women in Gaza. And Gaza needs to say, what do you want from us within the wider feminist movement? Yeah, because I might think I'm helping you by, you know, going on social media or something, but you need to say what you want, and, you know, we'll happily support.
Thanks, Dee. Paula, did you want to?
Maybe just to mention, I have to admit I didn't really get the question from Gaza, but just to say that La Via Campesina is also present in Palestine and also in Gaza. We have a member organization called WAC, Union of Agricultural Workers Committee. And we have been very active in Gaza as well, especially with fisher communities, also struggling to achieve the right to food of the community in Gaza.
Thank you, Paula. And I think, well, we have a couple of minutes left. Perhaps I would say we could make a final round of comments from you. Anything you would like to share as means of concluding remarks, or if a guiding question could help, just to say, okay, moving forward, what do we need? I know some of you already put forward very key points, actually all of you, but just if you would like to, yeah, as a final round, anything in particular you would like to highlight that you think must be said still?
Should I start?
Sure, let's go, yeah, in this order.
Okay. Let me just say that this has been a really rich discussion, and I think what Dee said earlier and what Paula reminds us of too is that our histories shape us to a large extent, but for us to really move forward and be liberated and equal and to flourish, we really have to critically assess that history of colonialism, of white privilege, of patriarchy, and capitalism. I mean, those structures, they trail along with us like shackles on our feet. And in some ways, knowing what that weight is and what that ominous rattling sound that trails us is, helps us to try and unload that. And we'll only do that if we work on it collectively. So it's an enormous privilege to be part of this conversation and to be challenged to try and do that together. And come out of the spaces where we're comfortable and we're used to being, and ways of thinking that we always thought, and to open ourselves to new ways of working, new ways of thinking, and new ways of relating. I go back to what I said earlier, that the relationships, not only our social relationships with each other, our political relationships, but critically in this time, our relationship to nature and food.
Thank you, Nettie. Dee, would you like to share some final thoughts?
Yeah. For me, Nettie hit it on head, right? But it's also about us shifting our power relationships. So whilst we're on this journey of unraveling and learning from each other and supporting each other, right, we need to be shifting those power relationships. And, you know, coming into our power as women, as non-binary people, we need to be stepping into our power and stepping into those places of so-called power as well.
Thank you, Paula.
Yeah, my final remark goes in the same sense, but I would like just to remind, it's not about the topics we highlighted here. They are not merely private aspects, no? It's not because I am a person of color, or because I am a homosexual, a transsexual, or a migrant worker. It's not just a private struggle, no? It's part of a social struggle. In terms of agriculture, it is about embracing all individuals, no, especially when it comes to small-scale food production. No matter who is that, no, it doesn't matter if it is a migrant worker coming from somewhere else, or if it is a homosexual person or whatever. No, it's about all of us remaining on the land, or being able to go back to the land, because we are the ones already feeding the road, and we want to keep doing so. Feeding the road, at the same time we are caring for the maintenance of biodiversity, contributing for cooling the planet, and so on. So we cannot divide ourselves, and at the same time it's just not a private struggle. It is something that has to be said, has to be put on the table, and where we have together to look for collective strategies, to work together and to carry our struggle for a better world.
Thank you so much to the three of you. I think we have come to the end, and that was a perfect way to end this discussion today, or for today, let's say, because we can keep in touch. And on that note, I wanted again to thank the speakers and to thank all the participants for their comments and their questions. I wanted to say again that we will share this webinar on YouTube. We will upload it, and then we can share the link on YouTube, so that if you can share with colleagues or friends who couldn't be here today, they can also still take a look. We're also going to have one more webinar in Spanish with different speakers. So if anyone is still also interested, it's going to be on a Thursday, and you can find more information on our social media. On that note, the watch, again, here you have it. You can find it on the website that is in the PowerPoint. You can also engage in a discussion in our social media. You can find it through FIAN International, and you have the hashtags we're using for the watch, and then we can also engage and interact in that manner as well. And also to invite you to take a look at the supplement, because it's also an interesting tool that has some images and short messages. I think that would be everything from our side, and thanks again, everyone, and have a nice afternoon or have a nice day, depending on where in the world you are. Thank you.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.